I think it's just good to see it. And when people see it, they're like, holy crap, I knew I made money, but where does all my money go? And it's really cool to see that and do that at a young age, but then also be able to implement that for people around me.
Are you an entrepreneur seeking financial independence? We'd like to thank our sponsor, Oswego Private Wealth Management, led by Bob Bedridis, with 20 years of Wall Street experience. They offer tailored strategies to meet your unique needs. They provide comprehensive services, including tax mitigation, asset protection, and legacy planning. As a family business, they understand the importance of legacy, and they work closely with family-owned businesses. As a certified exit planner, Bob and his team are known for helping business owners become financially independent of their business. Visit OswegoPrivateWealth.com and schedule a free consultation to secure your financial future.
Welcome to the Measure Success podcast, where we feature top leaders on how they measure success in their business and life. Now, let's learn from their experiences.
Hi, this is Carl J. Cox, host of the Measure Success podcast, where I talk with top leaders about effective strategies that inspire success. Today, I'm excited to have with us Rich Moyer. He is a dynamic serial entrepreneur, investor, and franchisor. Welcome to the Measure Success podcast.
Thanks for having me on.
I'm always curious how people get into business. And you have an interesting story, how you started out being a golf professional. Tell us about that story and what intrigued you of perhaps there's a better way to have your career do something different in your life.
Yeah, out of high school, when I was in high school, I really got into the golf industry, or playing the game of golf and loving the game of golf. So graduated high school and I went straight into a small college in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and got into the golf industry, became a PGA professional. And while being in that industry for 6.5 years, I was able to shake hands with a lot of successful people. And a lot of my members were either in sales or they own their own companies. So after being in that industry for so long, I was like, well, damn, I'm on the wrong side of the counter. All my members are playing during the week, they're playing on the weekends, and they're playing on holidays when I'm working. So I just asked them, what do you guys do for a living? They were either in sales or they worked for themselves. So that led me into just asking them for jobs or advice or mentorship, and led me into, in 2012, starting in a sales position, inside sales. That led me into an outside sales position, which led me to starting my first company at 26 years old.
So I'm going to rewind to something you said earlier, because I think it's really profound. It's something I have shared with a number of people over the years, in that there's two ways you can make above average. And number one is by being in sales. And number two is by being an entrepreneur, a business owner, or somebody who's like a CEO type of running an organization. Those are the two key areas that I've historically seen where people are making, once again, above average areas. And it's really interesting that you saw that play out in the golf course, on your regular basis. Like, wow, I want to be more like them. But you did something that most people don't do. Instead of just doing what you always do, you decided to take the leap and take the jump to get towards there. So tell us about that moment of because that's scary, honestly, Rich. The first time you're like, okay, I'm going to get out of my comfort zone, get out of something that I love doing, meaning being in the golf industry directly, to actually getting out to having a new occupation. Tell us about that moment when you took that leap and started doing something different.
The first leap going from the golf industry into sales was pretty easy because the pay was better. Even the base salary was better. And then the hours were a lot less. And then it was just the freedom to kind of work as hard as the effort I put in was the effort I was going to get out. And the harder leap was when I was in sales, making $100,000+ a year, and started my first company where I paid myself $20,000 the first year. So I think that first leap was easy. The second leap was a lot harder, but I just kind of took the risk at 25, 26 years old and knew that worst case scenario, I can fall back on sales. I didn't have a wife or girlfriend at that time. And I just knew that the risk was, no risk, no reward. And I still say that to this day. So the leap was super easy for the first leap. The second one was really, really hard, especially when you have family members and friends saying, you're making great money. Why would you do that? But I did it, right? I just action over everything. I just went and jumped into it and got to a point where I was fortunate enough that first business was very successful and snowballed into a multi-million-dollar company.
Okay, so that is one of those things of a lot of people will never make that leap, meaning they're making six figures. Now, let's say in your case, we're making over $100,000 a year or more, and then you make $20,000. So I'm like kind of curious, had you had saved up some money where you could handle that, or was it tight when you were making that 20,000?
I always lived really simple, but yeah, I had a nice nest egg. I always had a nice nest egg, right? I bought my first house at 22 years old. I saved up from 18 to 22 to buy my first house. And then I always just kind of kept a nice nest egg. So some of that money that I had went into starting the business, and then just fortunate enough to put myself in a good position that I lived pretty simple. And I think that's probably another thing. People are afraid to take that leap because they live outside of their means. I was saving money when I was making 20 grand a year. And I think that's pretty difficult to do now with the current market we live in. But I think the ability to understand the lifestyle that you live in and look at your financials and look at a budget when you're that young, shoot, I know so many people now that are older that still don't have a personal budget. So for me, it just was fortunate to have a good head on my shoulders and start very young with saving money.
Yeah, that was great advice. Who gave you that advice? Was it something you learned from your parents, or is that something you picked up, or how did you? Because that is Grant Cardone talks about that, and I know not everybody's a huge Cardone fan, but he talks about when you go up the ladder, don't go up the ladder with your expenses, right? Stay down, and so you could take that money away and invest or save it, right, and to do something different to get into your new type of organization. Who gave you that insight to, hey, it's wise to actually put money away?
Yeah, my parents were definitely big into having good credit and saving, especially my mom. I think on the flip side, though, neither of them were like, hey, look at your financials or look at a budget on paper. And I think that was the biggest thing that helped me when I was 18. I just like, all right, here's the money I'm making. Here's potential tips I'll make on the golf course when I was working bag drop. And then, just budgeting for my fixed expenses and what I had to spend and then what I wanted to save. And I did that just willingly on myself, just trying to understand my financials a little bit better. And then I would schedule that out for the whole year. And then each month I would go back and audit it and make sure that I was saving money. And if there was any outlier expenses, whether it be, a car needed to be fixed or new tires, whatever that was, just kind of added that into the notes. So when I went back and looked at it a year later, I understood. And then I teach that to my employees, looking at it, whether if they're 25 or 35 or 40, looking at their financials, because it's pretty easy to dive into their lifestyle and understand you can't tell me you want a vacation, or you can't tell me you want to buy your first house, and this is where your money's going. So I think it's just good to see it. And when people see it, they're like, holy crap, I knew I made money, but where does all my money go? And it's really cool to see that and do that at a young age, but then also be able to implement that for people around me.
I love it. I love it how you've taken that. Here I have an accounting background, and I don't hear many people talking about those basic fundamentals that you mentioned, which is, be wise, put money away. And then what that did is it enabled you to take some of these risks. Once again, why people can't take risks is they don't have money put away to do it. When I opened up this current business, 40 Strategy, and I'm like you, Rich, a serial entrepreneur, had multiple different businesses. Rich, I don't mind saying this. My wife was like, not again. Do not start another business. I think you were saying that for yourself. It was like, why would you do this again? But two things. One is I knew I had a great idea and I was adding value in the marketplace. The second reason was I had money put aside, right? We had the college education, if you may, put aside. We had planned for these things. We were not going to, quote unquote, run out of money. Well, you can do those things when you are wise and you put money away. When you just spend it and you buy your, whatever it is, your most expensive car, or buy a boat, or buy all these different things. The next thing you know, you can't, you're living, you have the golden handcuffs, right? You cannot actually leave and take that risk and start something new because your expenses are high of whatever you lived into. And you can make the argument you actually don't have any wealth at that moment because you're just still living paycheck to paycheck, even with really high salaries. I love, once again, that insight you provided to it. So you got to this new company, you sold it, and you were able to make, $2.5 million. I loved how you were able to get towards that. That's a huge milestone. Congratulations on that. Now that's a big difference, right? Making $20,000 a year, and next thing you know, you have a paycheck for $2.5 million. Did that freak you out when you had that first big paycheck, and all of a sudden your bank account's a lot fatter, And tell me about your experience of that, because that messes with people's head a lot of times when that event takes place.
Yeah, I mean, everything that I ever really wanted. So I wrote down my goals in 2013. I sold my company in February 2017. One of several of my goals were kind of money driven, but I never knew at that point that I was going to own my own company. And then one of them was to own a house on Lake Norman here in North Carolina. And I ended up doing that before I sold the company. Just before it was a few days before I closed on my house, and then a few days after that I sold my company. So I think the ability to see 2.5 million, and I also had over 1.5 million in accounts receivable that was coming to me as well. So say $4 million that I was looking at, my mind was, how do I turn it into 20, or how do I turn it into the next thing? So a lot of that went into commercial real estate, which I've made a boatload of money off of over the last couple of years. Starting my first or Hoppin, the first location of Hoppin, which we're now franchising across the country, opened up a homemade ice cream shop with two of my best friends. We have 7 locations now. So it was all reinvested. I didn't spend it on really anything. I did a renovation on the lake house because it was built in '92, just some interior stuff. But outside of that, there was no big vacation. There was no just throwing money away at nightclubs or anything like that. I mean, for me, what's the purpose of burning money that you've worked so hard for?
Yeah, and what I also like is you are getting into things that create more dollars, right? That's basically what you're saying. Like, there's a difference between, once again, buying a car that, I'm not by the way, I have no problem with people who buy vehicles and things like that nature, but you have gone into other assets that generate more income, right? Versus an asset that doesn't generate income or won't appreciate, right? And a value that's going to get towards that. Even commercial real estate, where you said you get rents, right? You get more income from, as a result of getting into that, which is different than sometimes than just buying a house, so to speak. Even though, as we know, if you've been in real estate for a while, most likely your home value has increased over the past decade. All right, so you just kind of mentioned, hey, I started this ice cream shop. How the heck did you get into that? I mean, you have 7 different stores now. How are you involved with that? Tell us about that experience.
Yeah, 2 of my best friends. So when I moved to Charlotte from Myrtle Beach, one of my good friends down there, his best friend lives and is from Charlotte. So when I moved up here, we got connected and we stayed really close. And then he ended up moving from Myrtle up to here as well. And all 3 of us were up here. They were helping with me with my construction company. And MJ, his family has several ice cream shops down in Florida, and his uncle gave him the family recipe, said you should open up a homemade ice cream shop. So he approached me in 2016 and said, hey, would you invest in the ice cream shop? And I was like, man, it's us 3. Let's just all do it together. And I put up all the money. We opened up our first location where we make all of our ice cream still here in Charlotte in Plaza Midwood. And it was just something fun for me. Construction was so stressful. It was nonstop, 24/7. It felt like, and nobody ever called to say thank you. It was always, where your guys at? Why'd you mess this up? We need to finish this job type conversations. Whereas ice cream was fun, family friendly, just something completely different. And the upfront cost, the capital to open it was really small. So I thought it was a cool idea. The ice cream is phenomenal, and I thought it would just be one location, something fun to do. And turns out it's pretty lucrative, and we're continuing to grow.
So I love that. I love it, how idea you're willing to take the risk, and give it a shot. That is very exciting from that perspective. But how did you know? Like, it was kind of interesting there. You said there's 2 other things, 2 other ice cream shops. You start a new ice cream shop. That second store is often where a lot of companies go out of business, right? They aren't able to scale it. They aren't able to get it to that next level to work. How were you able to get it to work in this case, that second ice cream shop? And now obviously gone to, I think, 7 stores, you said, but tell us about that first experience, because often it fails, trying to scale it.
Yeah, the first one, obviously, right? That's the OG one. It's the most successful one still to this day. I think the second one really just kind of fell into our laps with the location, and it's not the best location, but the rent is super inexpensive, and we're in a decent location. If we go back to when we first got into that location, we probably wouldn't have done it. We probably would have waited for a better location, paid a little bit more rent, and just had a higher revenue, so top line revenue. But I think those are no different than Hoppin. Our second location didn't perform better as our first. So the learning experience there was just take your time a little bit more and dive into the demographics and the location and really understand what made your first location successful before you think, well, if I just go open up another one of these in another part of town, it's going to do the same amount of money. And that's been a really good learning lesson for me over the last 7 years, 8 years since 2017. So really cool learning experience, and it helped us, especially on the franchising side, to help us grow and learn those mistakes before we got into franchising across the country.
That's really interesting. You talked about how in each case, the second still sounds like they're profitable, but not as profitable as the first store. But it sounds like location was the number one why, behind it, as opposed to, you don't think it was people in that case or processes. You just truly think it came down to foot traffic.
Yeah, for sure. So our second ice cream shop is in probably one of the busiest parts of town in Charlotte, North Carolina. And there's a Jenny's ice cream shop that's right down the street that is in a mix of a bunch of restaurants. We are in the mix of maybe one or two restaurants, but then it's office buildings above us and some retail around us. So the foot traffic is there, but it's just more of, hey, we're walking by this stuff to go down to where the bars and restaurants are. So in hindsight, we're like, oh, we're in South End, it'll be fine. And it is fine, but it's not as lucrative as we know we could be. And then the bar, we opened up our second Hoppin' in Greenville, South Carolina, and it's just on the outskirts of downtown where all the other bars and restaurants are. So very similar. Walking traffic's not there. It's a 15, 20-minute walk to the other bars, and it's hard to recreate habits for people, right? If we're going out to drink, they're going to go to where 4, 5, 6 bars are, not be on an island with one location. So definitely some good learning lessons there. And like I said, we needed those to be able to grow in a smarter way.
What they talk about, the number one thing when it comes to a retail store is location, 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 right? There's the three most important things, so to speak, it comes to driving things. What have you learned now when you've done your third and fourth locations of these respectively? Because one of the stories of Burger King was they just followed where another McDonald's was because they knew McDonald's did all the research to get to their store. And so Burger King literally just went right next to them. Now, the surprise was business went up for both of them, which was the surprise finding, right? You would think that it'd be competitive and be a bad thing, but no, it actually drove more traffic to it because there was choices, right, so to speak. And in terms of, have you found that same situation for you when you've gone to either opening an ice cream shop or to opening a bar?
Yeah, for Hoppin' for the bar, 1,000%. We won't. I mean, that was one of the reasons our Greenville location isn't as profitable as it should be, because we're not around a ton of bars and restaurants. We have one small pizza spot and one wine bar next to us. But in Charlotte, we're around hundreds of retail, hundreds of bars, hundreds of restaurants, and being able to now have multiple locations and pull the demographics, sociographics, and look at the retail spaces around it, it allows us to go into other cities and have a pretty good idea of if the location's a good location or not. Ice cream shops are more of walkability, or if you're not in a bigger city, just traffic count. How much cars are going by. In our first location, there's so many cars that go by it, and it's just an easy turn in, grab some ice cream with the family, and get out. So it's less of, we don't want to be around a ton of ice cream shops. Not that I don't think it would hurt us, because I think our experience, our service, and our quality of our ice cream is going to compete with anybody. But it's less of that, and it's more of just walkability and a high traffic count.
The next big hard thing, you've said so much about location, once again, which is perfect. I'm glad you figured out where to go next, and that's enabled you to continue to grow. How have you scaled the people side? Because the second thing that people talk about in business is culture. Our business, outside of the product side, if it's not for the people, we're not going to deliver the product or services as much as we'd like. What have you done to create a quote unquote a sustainable culture as you continue to grow different either franchisees, right, with each of them respectively?
Yeah, for us, it does start at the top, but I think where most CEOs and most founders kind of get it mixed up is that they're at the top. You got to flip it, the triangle upside down. You're at the bottom, right? You work for your employees; they don't work for you. And until you realize that your employees are the most important people in your company, you're not going to be successful. You're not going to be able to grow, right? It's easy with one location to be successful, but to be able to grow, you really got to put your employees first. If your employees are happy and they're taken care of, and you're being a mentor to them, and you're giving them all the tools that they need to be successful, your customers are going to show up and they're going to have a good time, and they're going to experience a good atmosphere and a good vibe of your business. If you don't do that and you kind of feel like you're the boss, I'm the CEO or I'm the founder, you do what I say type attitude or micromanage, the best employees are going to flee, and the ones that are staying around are going to lose all motivation to work for you. So I've just always created the culture where I work for them. They don't work for me. Anything I ask them to do, I never ask in the way of like, you have to do this. It's always, hey, can you do this for me? And more than likely, I've done that. As we grow bigger and bigger, some of those things, as we adapt and change, I might not do them anymore. But early on, I did everything in the business, whether it was making ice cream, serving ice cream, or being in the bar and checking people in and providing that customer experience. So I think it's the biggest thing for me and our culture is that our leaders and our managers are working for our staff. Our staff isn't working for them, and it's no different for me.
So that is a very contrarian view, especially of historical part. Now, ironically, it's a book that's right behind me, Good to Great. It's exactly what it talks about: is servant leadership is the most important leadership concept. Matter of fact, all 11 companies, which is statistically impossible, had servant-based leaders. They call them level 5 leaders, but ultimately, at the end of the day, they were serving the company. The company was more important than themselves, right, in the process of getting things done. So how do you help teach a new manager who might be younger and they might be excited that quote unquote they've got power for the first time, right? That's a very common human element. Oh, I've got power. People here for me. They're going to do what I say, versus exactly the opposite, which is, no, I want to make sure you want to work with us and I want to be able to work for you. How do you change that culture? How do you help a young person who doesn't understand that to embrace those values?
Yeah, as cliche as it is, I mean, leading by example is going to be huge, right? I'm assuming most of the time that young person isn't just coming from the outside and taking a managerial position. They're probably working their way up. So from the beginning is just leading by example, and then after that is just, you got to be able to give them the expectations and then inspect what you expect. So the expectation is that you're going to lead very similar to the way I lead. And if you don't, then when I inspect it, we're going to have a conversation. First time, maybe it's just a conversation, but if you can't change it, then you're not the right fit for that seat. And you got to really be comfortable as an owner, as I've learned over the last 10 years, to either demote people or fire people. And unfortunately, not everybody's meant for a seat that is a managerial seat or a sales seat, or somebody might think they want to get into sales because there's better opportunity with money, and they might not be the best fit. So you got to be able to make that decision quickly and fill it with somebody that should be in that seat. And I think that's the biggest thing is just setting the expectation and inspecting on that expectation and leading by example, and then be comfortable with, hey, this isn't the right fit for you. We're going to go ahead and look for a better option within the company that will suit you better and make you more productive and also suit the company better.
So it's interesting. You said you had a lot of success with people coming up the ranks. What about somebody coming from the outside, right? And they come from a different company and different culture, values, different things that are there. How do you help train them when they once again have a different set of expectations from what they're used to?
I think in the training or the hiring process and the interview process, you try and get the best feeling that you can when it comes to personality. For the companies that I own, a lot of it comes down to personality, and just being a good leader is pretty easy, right? Culturally, all we need is people with good personalities, and obviously need some good managerial aspects of it as well. But I think if you can vet them out from the beginning in that interview process, it makes it a lot easier, because on paper, somebody might be perfect on paper, but I don't really look at it on paper. I look at, when they walk into the door, what's that personality? What's the vibe? What's the gut feeling? And then once you get them inside, again, it's just setting the expectation, letting them know this is how we run things. This is, as a manager and as an owner, this is how I do things. This is the culture. This is what we expect. And they're either going to fit in or they're not. And that's why I say you got to get really comfortable with being able to demote or fire people, because you're going to go through it quite a bit in the early stages of owning a company.
So it sounds like you're making those decisions fast. If you make that quote unquote mistake, right? It's hard, right? Even Google, who spends, I think, billions, right? At least hundreds of millions in terms of picking the right people, they've still found they're only right about 50% of the time, despite all the information that they get. So for you, I'm assuming you're not spending that much, and investing behind it. That's a hard call, right? Because you feel bad, like you made an hire and you thought you did the right thing, but you are making changes to have them move and do something differently. How quickly, I'm kind of curious, how quickly can you make that assessment, or how quick has it been in the past when you're like, wow, we misread that and they need some more training or they need to be in a different role?
Yeah, typically we're looking at 90 days. Just those first 30 days, you're typically going to know, right? Those first 30 days, and then you have 60 days to either remedy it, they have to figure it out, or yes, maybe it's more training or just more conversations. But usually in those first 30 to 45 days, you're going to have a pretty good idea if they're going to be a good fit or not for the role. So that, and then as we're growing, we've worked on some culture index things, and we just put that in front of our team. So really understanding how people operate, what makes them tick, and I think we'll probably utilize that for hires in the future. That's a really cool tool to utilize as a growing company, especially even for our franchisees. So we know, how do we work with this franchisee? Are they more of an entrepreneur spirit where they're going to kind of just take the bull by the horns, or are they less of that and kind of need hand holding throughout the entire process? So those are ways kind of pre-hiring to kind of vet people out and understand them a little bit more. But yeah, it's a 90-day, we usually 90-day process it, and we got to make a decision after those 90 days, and our hires know that.
It's good. Yeah, great. It sounds like they have clear expectations, and if we're going to succeed, we have to get through that 90-day part. So Rich, in your business today, and I guess we'll talk about Hopin, but we could talk about any of your businesses. How are you measuring success?
Measure success, for me, it's how many people can I lift up along the way, right? When I had my first company in construction, I had the ability to take people that were working for me for $10 an hour and they wanted to start their own company, and I helped them start their own company, and they have it till this day, and they're still doing hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars a year in their business. So I think the ability to touch the people around me, whether it's my employees that want to plan for their personal goals or plan for their growth in the business world, whether it be a manager of Hopin, own a Hopin, or start their own company, or just get into a different avenue. Money is just a way to keep count, right? If you're doing the right things, you're going to be successful. I always say doing the right thing is always the right thing. So measuring success for me is if somebody was to say, hey man, Rich is so successful, it's awesome seeing what he's doing. And that person goes, yeah, it's really cool that he's that successful, but really proud of him for, the amount of people he helped, or this is what he helped me do. And he helped me start my first company, and now I'm working for myself instead of corporate America, and I'm making $200,000 a year, whatever it may be. I think that's the bigger picture, right? That's the purpose that I have. And a lot of people are like, man, you're not passionate about construction, or you're not passionate about ice cream, or you're not passionate about beer or bar. What wakes you up? What gets you out of bed? And it's the people. And I think the ability to see my team, a lot of my team's been with me since day one, to grow with me and understand that they have the same vision I have, but they also have a leader that provides a lot of value to them and helps them out, whether it be personal or in their careers.
Love that. Great answer. Okay, so now let's love to flip to the personal side briefly. You've got a lot going on, Rich. You got a lot of different businesses, a lot of different activity. You got a family life. So explain to me what type of habits, I'm curious, what type of habits have you done in your kind of daily life, which helps you to manage and manage these different responsibilities and continue to perform at once again, above average level or really extraordinary level?
Early on, when I had my construction company, up at 5 a.m. working out, I think starting the day off with a workout is the best option. And that was 3 or 4 days a week. And then, that was a lot. That was 16, 18-hour days, 6 days a week typically. And if I needed a break, I really had to push myself just to go take that break. But golf was always my mental freedom, and it still is today. Getting on the golf course, just being in nature, kind of putting the phone away as much as possible, and playing golf. And now today with a wife and a 9-month or a 10-month-old son, you kind of stick to as much of that as possible. I still work out 3 days a week in the morning, just start the day as best as possible, stay physically fit, and also helps the mental as well. And then I try and golf when the weather's right, at least once a week, if possible. And I usually do that during the week. I'll sneak away early in the morning or late in the afternoon, play a quick round, so I'm not messing up the family weekends. And then, man, it's just those few things are all really that I need. And then every once in a while, just taking a break and being able to set time aside for my wife and I to have date nights, whether if it's once a month, just us two, trying to get back to some normalcy now that we have a 10-month-old. And the ability to have some freedom now working for myself. Early on, it was really tough. I was working more than I was doing anything else. But now I have a great team, a huge team behind me to feel like I can take some time off when needed.
Good for you. It's great to hear that story, how you were able to transition. So now let's kind of carry on your personal life. How are you measuring success there?
That's always the balance, right? It's the balance of you have I always say now a baby, right? And then I have my babies, which I call my businesses, and being able to grow both of those and also keep a great, strong relationship with your wife is a little bit harder than I expected. I thought, a kid would arrive and it just kind of be back to normal when he was born. And man, that was I wrong. Just understanding that the flow of the world is completely different. So just really understanding that, I think, was the tough part. Now that we've balanced that, it took us probably 3 or 4 months to really figure out. She's an entrepreneur as well. She has 2 bridal shops, one here and one in Miami, and we both just had different kind of mindsets. We like to be productive, and we felt like if we weren't with our child, then our businesses weren't getting what it needed, and we were with our businesses, our child wasn't getting what he needed. So just understanding that, but the success now is freedom and the balance of being able, if my wife says, hey, I need to go do something, are you there, are you available? I think that the success is there already, right? The freedom and the ability for me to be like, yeah, no problem, I'll block off my calendar for an hour and take care of little man. I think that's probably the biggest success, is just ultimate freedom. And sure, we might work harder than most people, but we also have more freedom than anybody else.
Yeah, thank you. No, I appreciate you sharing that. As my 4th kid has just recently graduated from high school. Kids change everything. For us, it was in a good way. As you continue to expand or grow, and you see these, you realize, talk about that servant-based thing. For a child, it's all about giving. Talk about all about giving, right? Because they're not going to be giving back other than some joy right behind seeing some of the growth that they have. So anyways, congrats to there. So is there a book? Yeah, I'll just leave it a book. I love what I says. Is there a book that has really inspired you in the past that you'd like to share with others?
No, I get this question every once in a while on podcasts. I honestly don't read. My mind it's in too many places. So if I try and sit down and read, or even try and listen to an audiobook, it just doesn't go well for me. So when you had mentioned that, what I was mentioning with that book behind you, it was funny because I don't think I've read a book since probably middle school or elementary school, whenever we were supposed to read books. So for me, reading books, podcasts I'll listen to every once in a while. A lot of my stuff that I like to listen to is just more short motivational stuff, whether it be a couple minutes, something just to kind of motivate me if I'm in a funk. Like there's a few guys that I like. I mean, Gary Vaynerchuk has some real simple things. Like it's honestly, life is pretty easy when you really look at it. So some of the things he says, it just breaks it down, dumbs it down. It's like, you have a choice, either go this way or that way, and make the decision. And then outside of that, I mean, it's just no books, just some quick motivational stuff if I'm feeling like I'm in a little bit of a hole and just need a little pick me up.
Well, I'd say even though what you said, you have a ton of wisdom that, even though you haven't generated from books, that you have been using. You talked about from how to manage people. That is directly from Good to Great, and how that part behind it, managing money. That's Dave Ramsey type stuff you were mentioning, right? Who's one of the best in managing money. I mean, you have used and 90-day reviews when it comes to hiring people. You've created and developed a lot of things that once again might be for others uncommon wisdom, but you found a way to make common wisdom, and I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, for me it was always literally just, if I wanted to learn something, I would just take the action and go do it, and then I would look back and say, oh, okay, that's how you do it. And I always said, you can't be afraid to fail. Failure is your trampoline to success. So it gives you that leap to learn. So if you're just take the action, you're going to make mistakes, and you're not really failing. You're just learning something or learning a better way to do it. And I always kind of compare it to the heartbeat, right? The heartbeat's up and down. And if your life and your business growth is not up and down, then you're probably doing something wrong, or you're not living. Because if your heart flatlines and your business flatlines, you're in a bad position.
Rich, how can people connect and learn more about you and your businesses and what you're doing?
Yeah, my door's always open. If you want to reach out and chat about Hopin, or chat just about franchising in general, or have any questions in that world, or just want some type of mentorship, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. Just search Rich Moyer, Hopin, or 2 Scoops. It'll pop up on Google. And then you can also reach out to me on Instagram, Rich_Moyer.
Rich, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on the Measure Success podcast today.
Yeah, man, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. To everyone who's listening, I hope you've enjoyed this. Rich is a true entrepreneur who's had a tremendous amount of success. I love the wisdom that he's been able to share today. To everyone else who's listening, we encourage you to subscribe and also take a look at our new $4 million strategy podcast, which is just a 4-minute podcast on tips, just like what Rich mentioned today. Matter of fact, he will be a guest for us as well. As I always like to say, wishing you the very best at measuring your success. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to the Measure Success podcast. We'll see you again next time to learn from the best. Remember to subscribe now to get future episodes.